Recording.
Buenas, soy Eduardo Medina y en esta ocasión
I see a lot of people out there giving really bad advice in the Linux community. So today I wanted to talk about one of the more common pieces of bad advice I see people give, especially newer Linux users, is, hey, you should be running Arch Linux because Arch Linux will help you learn Linux. It will teach you about Linux. You'll never learn Linux by running Ubuntu or Linux Mint or Manjaro or whatever it happens to be, right? You need to be running Arch. And when people go to these forums, these subreddits, and say, hey, I'm running Kubuntu and I'm having this problem, I get this error, I need to try to fix this particular situation on my machine. Well, if you'd have just run Arch Linux, you'd actually know about Linux and you'd be able to fix your machine. And that's just stupid. That's just bad advice. For one thing, who says that that person even wants to learn more about Linux? People sometimes just want to use an operating system. They just want to use their computer. And honestly, that's just ridiculous advice anyway, telling somebody they should use a distribution like Arch, or sometimes you'll see people say the same thing about Gentoo. Gentoo, you'll learn so much about Linux. Well, if you really wanted to learn as much about Linux as possible through installing a distribution, then everyone would recommend Linux from scratch, right? Which is literally building Linux, a complete Linux operating system from the ground up, and I'm talking about from the very base up. It's practically like a stage 1 Gentoo installation, except even worse than that, right? It takes sometimes several days, sometimes a couple of weeks to install Linux from scratch, depending on what kind of machine you're installing it on, if it's not a very powerful machine, because it has to do so much compilation. And it teaches you a lot of the nuts and bolts about what makes a Linux operating system. But not everybody wants to do that. I'm a Linux geek. I don't want to do that, right? But you could say, well, I don't really know enough about Linux unless I actually install Linux from scratch. Guys, that's not what most people want to do. Most people just want to actually use an operating system. They want to install something and go. Stop with trying to make people use distributions because it's going to somehow magically make them some kind of power user or really super smart. That's not the way this works. And it's not just with Linux that you see these kinds of snobs out there, right? These distro snobs. You also see it with other pieces of software, such as Emacs. Emacs, of course, there's many distributions, many different frameworks that can be built around Emacs, such as Doom Emacs. I've done so many videos about Doom Emacs, and a lot of you guys are trying out Doom Emacs because of my videos. And then you go to support forums or chat rooms or whatever it happens to be, and you're having an issue with Doom Emacs, with your config file, or you're getting errors or whatever it happens to be, and you're asking these questions to the Emacs community, and occasionally you get these Emacs snobs that say, well, you should just be using standard GNU Emacs, and if you would have used that, you would have had to build GNU Emacs from the ground up to make it into a proper text editor, and then you'd actually know more about Emacs, and then you'd really know what those error messages, and you know how to fix your problems, because it was so much harder for you to get to where you were going if you just had to start with GNU Emacs. It'd have made you a better Emacs user. That's ridiculous. Telling these people that their journey was too easy, they needed to take a rougher journey, a tougher journey to get to where they are, and that would have made them a better Emacs user, maybe they just want to write some text. Maybe this person is a novelist. They installed Doom Emacs because they didn't want to fool with GNU Emacs, and they just want to open up their text editor and actually write something, right? Because they actually have work to do, right? Just like not everybody wants to install Linux from scratch. Not everybody wants to write Emacs from scratch either. Not everybody wants to install GNU Emacs and then have to install all the plugins and write this massive config file that does all the things out of the box that something like Doom Emacs already comes with. So don't look down on those people that use Doom Emacs. Don't view them as noobs because they use Doom Emacs rather than GNU Emacs like you do. And don't look down on those Ubuntu peasants because they use Ubuntu and you use Arch, by the way, right? Don't have that kind of snob mentality. We don't need that. Just because they made different software choices than you did, that doesn't make you better than them. It doesn't make them better than you. It just makes us different. And our differences, that's what makes this community special. Peace, guys.
Hi. I just want to have a chat.
I'm seeing something. It's smiling at me, but not a friendly smile. It's the worst smile I've ever seen in my life. And whenever I see it, I just get this god-awful feeling like something really terrible is gonna happen. It told me that today's the day that I'm gonna...
Do you see it right now here?
Linux distributions that use the XFCE desktop environment.
Oh, man. Quizzes. You know, they're gonna stay. And like, fuck.
You know, we connect. I like to.
Hi. I just want to have a chat.
I'm seeing something.
There's a whole bunch of them out there. There's a lot of good ones out there. So today what I thought I would do is I would take, I don't know, 10 or 12 very popular Linux distributions that offer the XFCE desktop environment, and I would break them down into a tier list. So I added 12 very popular Linux distributions that offer XFCE as a desktop environment. So what I have included here is Arch Linux, Arco Linux, Debian, Fedora, Gentoo, Linux Lite, Linux Mint, Manjaro, MX Linux, Peppermint OS, Void Linux, and Xubuntu. I think, that really covers certainly the most popular desktop Linux distributions that offer an XFCE environment.
Okay, first, I need this one. And then let's grab one of these. Right. And then let's do the thing.
environment. And I'm not going to go necessarily in alphabetical order here. Some of these distributions I haven't used lately. I'll be honest, there's a couple that I added here that I have not used probably in a year or maybe 2 years. But for the most part, these Linux distributions, they haven't changed that much, so I feel pretty comfortable in being able to rank them. So the first one that kind of jumps out at me is Arco Linux. Arco Linux, of course, you guys know, is the distribution I actually use on my workstation here at the office. I make all of my videos on Arco Linux. I also use Arco Linux on my home computer, but I don't use the main Arco Linux edition, and they actually do have a flagship edition of Arco Linux that actually uses the XFCE desktop environment. It also comes with OpenBox and i3. It comes with 3 desktops on that ISO, but XFCE was kind of their flagship desktop environment when Arco Linux bursted on the scene, and it's still a really good XFCE experience. If you're looking for a very customized, a very clean looking XFCE that's really got some bling to it, a lot of good themes, a lot of fancy icons, and of course you get the entire Arco Linux ecosystem, because Arco Linux has a lot of custom apps like the Arco Tweak Tool, which has now been renamed to the Arch Linux Tweak Tool. So you get a lot of that extra goodness, but I'm not going to focus on a lot of the stuff that's under the hood of these distributions. I just want to talk about who offers a good XFCE experience, and Arco Linux, I think, definitely provides a good XFCE experience. I'm not going to say it's great, because I don't want to just hand out, great rankings, because I want these distributions to have to earn them, and I can think of a couple that I know I'm going to put in the great.
Where's the video? Is it here?
In this video, we are going to compare the Linux Mint Cinnamon and the Linux Mint Mate. So the Linux Mint Cinnamon is the Linux Mint project. It is free and open source. It is a fork of GNOME 3. It was launched in 2012, and it is a full-fledged GNOME based desktop environment. And if we see Linux Mint Mate, and it is a was launched in 2000 GNOME 3. It was launched in 2012.
So Fedora 36, right? Uses GNOME.
And it is a full-fledged GNOME based desktop environment. And if we see Linux Mint Mate, so it is the fork of the GNOME 3. It was free and open source, and it was started by a user of Arch Linux GNOME based desktop environment. And if we see Linux Mint Mate, so it is the fork of the GNOME 3. It was free and open source, and it was started by a user of Arch Linux, and now it is adopted by the Linux Mint. So there are a lot of similarities and differences in the Linux Mint Cinnamon and the Linux Mint Mate. So now let's try the look and feel of both the desktops. Alright, so here on the computer screen we have Linux Mint Cinnamon on my right side, and on the left side we have Linux Mint Mate. So for any desktop environment, this is the most important part. The way it looks, the way it behaves, and the way things are arranged. Every single factor is guaranteed to impact your experience. So let's take a look at the default desktop of the...
Wait a minute. So I would like. No, but I don't have a user, I think.
Cinnamon. So here is the desktop for the Cinnamon, and here it is the default screen of the Mate desktop. When compared side by side, there is a very little difference between these two environments. So now let's have a look at the apps menu. So here we can see that there is a little bit difference between the Linux Mint Cinnamon icons and the Linux Mint Mate desktop icons. So now let's open the windows on both desktops and compare. So there is not more difference in terms of the vibe in the both desktop environments. So now let's talk about the software collection. Both environments come up with their default softwares, and the file managers are one of the most important software for all the desktop system in the world. So the Linux Mint Cinnamon features the Nemo file manager, and on the other hand the Mate desktop features the Kaja file manager. So now let's compare the terminal of both the desktops. The Linux Mint Cinnamon grabs the GNOME terminal as the default terminal emulator. On the other hand, the Linux Mint Mate uses the Mate terminal as the default terminal emulator. So now if we see the image viewer, then both Linux Mint Cinnamon and the Mate features XViewer as the default image viewer. So it is a great software that is based on Eye of GNOME. So now let's talk about the media player of both the desktops. So the default media player for the Linux Mint Cinnamon and the Linux Mint Mate is the same. It is a lightweight media player that is based on GNOME videos. And if we talk about the text editor, then Linux Mint features the same text editor across all the flavors. It is a lightweight text editor. Let's compare the lock screen display on both the editions. So here is the Cinnamon lock screen and here is the Mate lock screen. So now the question is that which one is the better among both the versions? So it is completely up to you. There are different variables that you have to keep in mind. For new Linux users, my personal recommendation would be the Cinnamon desktop. It is extremely comfortable for Windows users. You can also try out Mate desktop if you want to. But the Linux Mint allows having multiple desktop environments at your system. Both of these desktop environments are really cool and enjoyable for everyone. There are tons of ways to enhance your experience with both the desktop environments. So a great way is theming, and if you want to learn that how to update themes on Linux Mint, then go to this link and you will get a tutorial that how we can install, download and update the themes on our Linux Mint system. I hope you have found this video useful for comparing Linux Mint Cinnamon and the Mate desktop. So keep following us on linuxint.com for more useful content and videos about Linux. Thank you.
Echoing a new line in bad.
What is this? Linux page 2. I want to know the material, bruh. Material. This is actually a good investment for Spirit. But I don't care if like has Mickey Mouse on it or whatever. Hey, no, okay, this is the so Kinesis advantage to PVT. PVT. Holy smokes, bro.
Great ranking, but I definitely think Arco Linux XFCE is definitely in the good tier. And when I think of the great tier, I immediately think of Manjaro. Manjaro, of course, one of the most popular desktop Linux distributions around. Manjaro, their flagship desktop edition, has always been their XFCE edition. And it's a very nice XFCE desktop. It's very clean, very polished, got a lot of nice apps and custom tools and beautiful welcome screen, beautiful theming. Everything about Manjaro XFCE is just gorgeous, and that's something to be proud of, especially with the XFCE desktop environment, because it's kind of older. It looks a little dated typically, but on distributions that really focus on the theming aspect of it, you know, you can actually do some really gorgeous stuff with XFCE, and Manjaro really knocks it out of the park and is definitely in the great tier. Now, I think another one that really kind of hits it out of the park, and it's one that doesn't get a lot of love actually, is Linux Lite. Linux Lite has for many years been one of my favorite Debian-based Linux distributions that uses the XFCE desktop environment. I actually have installed Linux Lite many times on friends and family computers when they bring me their, virus-riddled Windows 7 laptops that no longer work and they're wanting to revive these older machines. Linux Lite has always been one of those distributions I could always go to. And the great thing about Linux Lite, it looks gorgeous. It has a beautiful XFCE desktop environment that's themed very nicely. And it really resembles the Windows 7, Windows 10 kind of workflow. So if you're used to Windows, transitioning a Windows user over to Linux Lite is actually pretty comfortable. I've never had anybody that brought me their Windows laptop that no longer worked and I put something like Linux Lite on it and handed it back to them ever call me and say, hey, I can't figure out how this thing works. Linux Lite really, they actually designed this distribution and their XFCE desktop for the Windows-centric kind of user, right? That person that is used to that Windows workflow, and that's why I think it definitely deserves to be in the great tier. Another distribution that kind of jumps out at me as far as an XFCE-specific distribution is Peppermint OS. Now, Peppermint OS is interesting because I've got to be honest, I actually haven't used Peppermint probably in about 2 years. It still sees releases, but it's not a distribution that's very popular at all. I never hear about it, which is probably why I haven't reviewed it in a couple of years, is because until I was making this list today, I had forgotten all about Peppermint OS. I was actually just going through DistroWatch looking for some XFCE distros for this video, and Peppermint showed up on the list, and I had forgot all about this distribution. Peppermint has never really been that popular. A few years ago, it had some popularity. You would see articles about it. Occasionally you would see YouTube reviewers reviewing Peppermint OS. It's a XFCE desktop. It's kind of a hybrid kind of desktop. They were using a lot of XFCE and LXDE applications. And it looked good. Really good theming, and it wasn't a minimal distribution in the sense that it didn't have a lot of stuff installed. It actually had a ton of stuff installed, a lot of programs. And it was one of those distributions that I think new users, new to Linux users would be very comfortable on. The problem with Peppermint OS is that the lead maintainer of Peppermint OS died a couple of years ago. He passed away kind of suddenly, and that kind of, I guess slowed down a little bit of the development of the project, and maybe that is why it doesn't see as much popularity these days. That said, they do see releases every now and then. I know they had a release earlier this year. I didn't take a look at it because honestly, it really never popped up on my radar, but I wanted to mention it because I do think it's a distribution that deserves more love. I'm going to put it in the okay category, even though I had some positive things to say about it. I do think that the fact that the lead maintainer of it passed away, and I'm not really sure about the direction of Peppermint OS currently, I'm just going to throw it in the okay category for now, but I could have easily probably put it in the good tier. Another XFCE distribution that just jumps off the page, we should talk about Xubuntu, right? So this is the official Ubuntu flavor with the XFCE desktop environment. I'm going to put it in the meh tier. And the reason Xubuntu goes in the meh tier, it's got nothing to do with the fact that it's based on Ubuntu. I love Ubuntu. I love all the apps in the repository. Ubuntu is a great base to base a distribution on, but if we're talking about the best implementations of XFCE, Xubuntu is a rather plain looking XFCE. It's not a vanilla XFCE. They do customize it, but they're not really trying to go for the wow factor with Xubuntu, right? It's very plain. It's kind of old looking, kind of dated looking. It has always been my least favorite, really, of the main flavors of Ubuntu. I actually don't mind the Ubuntu with GNOME. I didn't mind the main flagship edition of Ubuntu when it had Unity. I actually think Kubuntu is a very nice KDE Plasma distribution. I think Lubuntu with LXQt is great. Ubuntu Budgie is also an amazing distribution, but Xubuntu, it doesn't have the same spit and polish. It doesn't look like a professional product compared to a lot of the other main flavors of Ubuntu. Again, that's just subjective. That's my opinion. But for me, I'm going to put it in the meh category. Next up is MX Linux. MX Linux, their flagship edition, desktop edition, is the XFCE desktop environment. So you would expect them to do a really good XFCE. And that's exactly where I'm going to put them. I'm going to put them in the good tier. Now, I'm not going to quite put them in the great tier because honestly, I actually think that Manjaro and Linux Lite, their XFCE desktops, look better than MX Linux. They look a lot more polished, a lot more clean. MX Linux still, even though it's very unique, very striking when you look at it, it does have a dated kind of look. I also am not crazy with MX Linux, the way they do that side panel that's on the left-hand side of the screen. I don't mind a left-hand side panel, but it's weird because they have the buttons like in the reverse order is where you'd kind of think they are on the panel. It's a little strange to me, that desktop. I do think it's very unique, and I know a lot of people love it, so I've got to put it in the good tier. I know some people are going to fight me on that and say it probably deserves to be in the great tier. I could probably make a case for it being in the great tier, but for me, I much prefer these two over MX as far as their versions of XFCE, so I'm going to put MX in the good tier. I think the next distro I want to discuss is Linux Mint. Now, Linux Mint has three main desktop flavors. They have Cinnamon, Mate, and XFCE. And most people, when they think of Linux Mint, they think of the Cinnamon desktop because the Linux Mint team created the Cinnamon desktop. It's their baby. If you don't think of Linux Mint with Cinnamon, then maybe you think of it with the Mate desktop because they've been a big contributor to the Mate desktop environment for many, many years as well. But they have an XFCE edition that really doesn't get much love, at least from the community. You don't hear as many people talk about Linux Mint XFCE desktop because they've been a big contributor to the Mate desktop environment for many, many years as well. But they have an XFCE edition that really doesn't get much love, at least from the community. You don't hear as many people talk about Linux Mint XFCE. And I'm not sure why, because their XFCE edition is quite good. You get all of the goodness with Linux Mint, under the hood with the repositories and all the software and all the Linux Mint goodness and applications and everything, but their XFCE desktop environment actually looks pretty good. I can't say that it's the best looking XFCE desktop environment, but it's not ugly. You know, I don't hate it, and I feel actually really comfortable anytime I use Linux Mint XFCE. So you know what? I'm going to put it in the good tier. I can't make a case for it to be any lower than the good tier for sure. And now all I've got left are 5 very popular Linux distributions: Arch, Debian, Fedora, Gentoo, and Void. And this may or may not shock some people, but if you've never actually used any of these distributions, unlike all the distributions I've already placed on the tier list, these 5 distributions, they typically ship their desktop environments as is, meaning you just get vanilla XFCE, vanilla GNOME, vanilla Plasma. They don't make any customizations. It gets shipped to you as it came from upstream. And because of that, these XFCE distributions are going to be very bad, because XFCE out of the box without any customizations really looks like something out of the late 1990s. It's very ugly, horrible wallpaper, horrible GTK themes and icon themes. It just doesn't look good. So honestly, Arch Linux, Debian, Fedora, Gentoo, and Void Linux, they're all going in the yuck tier for their XFCE desktops, because they actually don't do any theming at all to XFCE. You're just getting vanilla XFCE. And when I say they don't do any customization to the XFCE desktop environment, they may make some very minor things you wouldn't notice, you know, some tweaking to make sure that XFCE works on their particular distribution, because all these distributions fundamentally under the hood do some different things, different package managers, different init systems and things like that. But for the most part, 99.9% of what you see with XFCE on these distributions is straight from upstream. And again, it is not a good XFCE experience. It certainly pales in comparison, especially to the distributions up here in the great and the good tier. So that is my tier list for Linux distributions with XFCE. I know a lot of people are going to take issue with my rankings. Some of you guys are going to disagree, and that's fine. It's all subjective. It's all opinion. And again, this was just my list. If you have a different list, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know what your favorite XFCE Linux distribution is. Before I go, I need to thank a few special people. I need to thank the producers of this episode: Dustin, Gabe, James, Matt, Maxim, Mimit, Michael, Mitchell, Paul, West, Why You Bald, Homie, Alex, Alan, Armor Dragon, Chuck, Commander Angry, Yokai, Dylan, Greg, Marstrom, Urian, Alexander, Paul, Peace, Arch, and Fedora, Polytech, Realities for Lust, Steven, Tools, Devler, and Willie. These guys, they're my highest tiered patrons over on Patreon. They are the producers of this episode. The show is also brought to you by each and every one of these fine ladies and gentlemen. All these names you're seeing on the screen right now. These are all my supporters over on Patreon, because I don't have any corporate sponsors. I'm sponsored by you guys, the community. If you like my work, want to see more videos on Linux, free and open source software, more tier list videos, subscribe to DistroTube over on Patreon. All right, guys. Peace. If you think these rankings are bad, wait for my tier list of GNOME distros.
Okay. Oh, there was something I forgot? No? Okay. Would you still love me if I was? You. I know him. Mm, mm, I need something to hype me up, and by the way, did it finish? Okay.
Welcome back to Switched to Linux. Well, today we're going to talk about Update Wars and the fact that Linux Mint wins. This is going to be a somewhat negative video, so if you're like, Linux is the best thing in the world, I'm going to give you a couple of negatives, a couple of downsides. To be fair, these types of downsides have also been reported on Windows and Mac as well, so it's not like Linux sucks and the other ones are good, but I hate updates. And in our world's like, update, you know. And the reality is, updates are really good when you're getting security patches. They're really bad when you're getting feature updates. And that's the thing I wish would separate out. And it's the reason why I tend to use Debian-based systems more for production than I use Arch-based systems. Because I do not want everything under the sun.
Professor Terence Tao is the equivalent of a rock star in mathematics.
Regarded to change. I do not want a lot of issues changing around. I don't want my whole software to change all of the functions and other issues like that. I'm just like, I don't want any of that. And so as you push updates onto the system, you'll get to the point where it's like you pray nothing goes wrong. So yesterday I had just a little bit of data left. It's the last day of my data plan, so I got to use it because it's going to recycle. So like, all right, so that's usually the day I push updates. What could possibly go wrong? Well, I got everything from perfect smoothness, that would be Linux Mint, to aggravated annoyance, to let's explain my updating days. First and foremost, Linux Mint updates flawlessly. I have not noticed any differences, any changes, other than the one package, which is on most of my computers, not this one right here that I'm streaming on, but the computers that I do my basic work on, and that is Thunderbird. Thunderbird is one of these programs that just rolls out brand new features in every update. I have not checked, but I'm probably pretty sure the latest Thunderbird is probably included in the Linux Mint. I just didn't boot that up. Well, what happened with Thunderbird? Well, Thunderbird in version 102, they decide that they're going to do the most annoying thing in the history of the universe. Message threading is on and by default now. Yay! The annoying crap that is the most annoying, stupidity I've ever seen in an email platform. Here's the theory. You get an email and you have this reply thread, so you can find the one thread and you can go back and forth and say, oh, this is the reply, this is the reply, this is the reply. Well, sometimes you get emails that are like 1,000 messages deep, and it's kind of crazy. This is kind of problematic in a way. Now, some people may really like this functionality. I have not met the person who intrinsically looks at this and goes, wow, that's amazing. No, but what happens is people push this crap on the world, and then when the world gets this crap pushed on it, it's just like, whatever, and you can't do much about it, or you don't really know how. Now, Evolution has had the ability to do message threading for a long time, and there is a global checkbox to roll down and click turn off. Boom! Solved everywhere. Not Thunderbird. Oh no. They push this out like it's the most amazing thing that everybody and their brother wants. Threading is a useful way of displaying your message lists in Thunderbird instead of just listing messages sorted by date, because who would possibly want to find their email by date? I mean, you push the button at the top, you can sort by who sent it, you can sort by the date it was sent. I mean, all this kind of stuff. Message threading, try and find the response. Good luck. It's not as simple as this, especially when you got like 15 people on an email thread and everybody's emailing back and forth and the system has no earthly idea what in the world's going on. Then you wish you had things sorting by date. This is the default view starting in version 102. Okay, now, Thunderbird, though it's not like Evolution with a unified inbox where you just have one basic place and do all your settings. Oh no. What is it? It puts the emails in a together hierarchical. This is especially handy to keep conversations on mailing lists organized, which doesn't work if you have that many people going back and forth. But it also means saves you from losing individual messages of conversations and stacks of other messages. No, there's very easy ways around that. Okay, so enable threading on a folder. To disable threading on a folder, if the threaded view doesn't quite suit you, you can disable it by following the steps in the unthread in the sort by menu. Applying the threading to other folders, of course, they give you a brand new threading option inside of your tabs over here, which you can quickly turn off if you want. Then you can apply the current view to, and near the bottom of the menu, and choose target folder from the list. Here's the problem that some of us say is that this is useless garbage and it's completely annoying. And they think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but there's other people that don't. So, for example, this person here says in any folder I can untick thread from the column chooser, but I'm using Thunderbird for 11 different email accounts with between 4 and 8 folders each. Is there a way to turn this crap off globally? Nope. So this is a new annoyance. Every single one of my computers that now runs Thunderbird, I have to go through and turn this crap off on every single one of them. It might be worth dropping Thunderbird and finding another email platform. So if there is another email platform that's similar to Thunderbird, let me know in the comments. I'm going to check them out because I'm not dealing with this garbage. You don't have a way to globally turn it off everywhere. Screw you. I am done with your damn application. All right. That's the global one that's going to be everywhere. Now, Manjaro, they push out, starting, I guess, in early September, they push out a random update to everybody running Manjaro and Plasma, which I am doing, which, hey, turns on an activated behavior. It turns your Plasma into the useless abomination known as Gnome. If I wanted to use Gnome, Plasma, and Manjaro people, I would install Gnome on my system. No, I do not want my mouse to accidentally hover to the top of the screen because I've rolled the mouse out of the way, and then, whoop, my whole view changed, and I see an overview of everything in this useless format that looks cool, but it's totally useless. My God, you morons. So, despite having my system been set up for 2 years, having nothing active in the hot corners, now this is the screen edges, and I have explicitly turned all of this crap off 2 years ago when I built the system, pushed the update through yesterday, and boom, look at this. You want this amazing screen view. So this person here responds, not sure how to call this behavior in order to search for it. When my mouse goes near the top left-hand corner, all active apps show up, blanking out the desktop, minimize and apps I'm working with. I understand why some would find this useful, but for me and my motor skills, it's very aggravating. Is there a way I can cancel it? Of course there is. It's easy. System settings, workplace behavior, screen edges. My question is, Manjaro and Plasma folks, why in the hell did you turn this abomination on when I've explicitly set all hot corners and hot edges and all other hot crap turned off since the time I've actually had the computer running? For the love, why are you changing my system settings? What are you, Windows? Every single time I push the update, it wants to change everything. Oh, look at this new feature. We want to throw it in your face. You really want everything that you're working on to disappear on the screen and show you a view of everything that's possibly open. So, of course, there's a little bit more in this thread here about it, but maybe we even have a picture of what this abomination looks like. But it's basically they have activated a screen edge in a place where I did not have a screen edge. So I first turn this on, I'm like, what the hell is this? This is basically what it looks like. It's basically turning your computer into, you know, Mac and GNOME. If I want to use GNOME, Plasma folks, I would. Oh, those are kind of easy. They're annoying, but, you know, whatever. I can work with them. Oh, Endeavor. Endeavor OS, as often as I have praised you, you get a giant screw you in this one because,
Oh, nice. Bro, how do I do like or how do I get XFCE virtual Linux Mint? Or Linux Mint about wait, what? Okay. The other dude is a taxi bar. So
detail about writing the personal and research statements, and then we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. And if you have questions at any and start sharing my screen.
fuck.
All right, can you see that?
I can see it.
Okay, great. So thanks for joining us. This is the workshop on the NSF GRFP. the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. I'm Hannah O'Halloran. I'm a Faculty Research Support Officer in the Central Faculty Research Development Office. And Marina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I am Marina. I am with the College of Arts and Science, but also a faculty.
In their full transparency report here, full transparency on the Grub issue. Now, this is so bad, any single article you land on, this is pinned at the top. Because literally, if you update Endeavor, it crashes your system. It doesn't crash your system. It doesn't brick your system. What it does is it deletes Grub. So full transparency on the update 829. Now, I am recording this September 16th. This is August 29th. This is 17 days ago since this was posted. And after updating to Grub 206R322, many users reported their machines could fail to boot or booted directly into BIOS or other OS. What caused it? Well, with this commit, there was an issue with the Grub. Basically, it wiped Grub out of your system. How come not everybody was impacted? It kind of depends on the FW setup. In my case, yeah. I did. Now, there was actually something down here that indicated that, yeah, this was kind of fixed. Newsflash, it's not. As of last night, I updated my system, and because it's like midnight, I'm like, all right, last thing, I'm getting kind of tired. How bad could the updates be? Well, wiping out Grub isn't the worst thing that could happen on a computer, but it comes perilously close when you boot up your computer. I'm like, there's my... its whole drive is encrypted. So there's my passkey. Enter my passkey. I lean back in my chair. I close my my eyes, and this white flash shows up. I'm like, that's not normal. I open my eyes on the BIOS screen. Like, what the hell? All right, shut the computer down, reboot it. All right. BIOS. What the hell? Really? Really, Endeavor? So I start looking up first Arch, Fix BIOS, or Fix Grub, and I'm like, and then I'm like, oh, you know, this is Endeavor. Endeavor has good support. Let's go ahead and Endeavor. And then I land on this article here. Latest Grub package update needs some manual intervention. 22 days ago. Good to know, Endeavor. Do you guys ever read all of the forums and system logs and everything before you push? I mean, maybe we should, but this is Arch, for crying out loud. Literally, I updated the whole system. It took me an hour to get my system back up online following these steps. And once I had it back on, it says, hey, there's 2 more updates. You want to apply them? I dare you to. I'm like, hell no. I'm going to bed. I mean, really. So the latest Grub package needs some manual intervention. What happens? Well, it kills Grub is what it does. The bird came in and just ate that Grub. I went fishing with the Grub. I don't know. Maybe I was using it on my Tux Traveler video from today where I was, fishing. A friend of mine was fishing. Okay, so Grub update today is causing issues on UEFI systems. It will make most...
Hello, Sam. Stuck on the lab. Everything works fine until the hash value grows to a larger value. The what value okay, I'm stuck with everything works fine until the hash value grows to a larger value. The Y value meant for catching the 4 leftmost bits doesn't seem to be working properly. Print in. So actually, copy. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
System's unbootable, so take care. Of course, if you've read this prior to pushing the update, then you know that you either don't update Grub. One of the two options is you don't update Grub. The other option is before you reboot your system, run grub install before you reboot your system. But of course, after you update all these things, it's like, hey, an update's requested. Chew doesn't just push reboot right away. Me, following the instructions. So basically, I had to download. Now, this caused me to have to eat up another 2 gigabytes of my highly limited data plan. I'm paying over $100 for 150 gigabytes of data. That's all I have in the month. Now it's midnight, so I have to do it now. So I have to use 2 gigabytes of my 150 gigabytes of data to download the brand new Endeavor OS because none of the older ones would work. And so I have to download a brand new one, basically wasting a bunch of my data, put this on an ISO, boot into this. Now, this guy here, praise for this guy who...
Udemy. No matter how you say it, it's a top online learning destination with
back up out of that one there. Praise for this guy here, Joe Camprad. Very amazing article here about using Arch chroot, which allows you to fix it. Basically identify where your partitions are, which mine actually wasn't on the list. I am encrypted, but for some reason my EFI partition system is not involved in the encryption like it should be. But nevertheless, I went down here on the bottom for encrypted systems. I followed these steps to the T, which is going to be unlocking my device, mapping my device into the mount point, and then setting the EFI system onto my mount partition. Once you get down there, enter chroot here, and then once I get to chroot, come down here and do grub install, and that is going to fix your system. So this is the problem, is that you'll get Linux systems like Arch that will want to update all the time, and sometimes things aren't patched up right. And this is a pretty serious bug to not be fixed after 30 days. This is a major serious bug to not be fixed after 30 days. Now, sure, if I spent any time on the Endeavor forum or looked at the news at any point in time on Endeavor, I might have seen this. But nevertheless, this is a crazy, unacceptable thing. And then you get this combined with the Thunderbird update. And also, oh, by the way, I found it today, Brave stopped working as well. First, it stopped working on YouTube in general. Brave is the browser I use for YouTube. Don't use it for anything else. I had to reflash the thing. Once it did that, now it's stuttering a little bit. Is it worth just dropping Endeavor OS and going to something else? I don't know. But nevertheless, Linux Mint did indeed win the update wars. When I use Linux Mint, push the updates, nothing to my knowledge has yet broken. I have not seen anything broken yet anyway. The Thunderbird is probably going to be an annoying thing, but whatever. Actually, I don't even know if I have Thunderbird on that particular computer. I'm not even sure. It's a backup from a backup, really. So, but everything else, I did a lot of things with it. Everything else I tested worked perfectly fine. And so I'm looking at this going, man, that's the factor. Linux Mint once again wins the update wars. Manjaro, what are y'all doing? Endeavor OS, unacceptable to not fix an issue with Grub. And I did find somewhere it said this should be fixed, but it's not. It's not in my setup. So there is kind of my thoughts. Be warned when you're updating. Give yourself some extra time to fix things. And hey, if you have them, have some available bootable ISOs floating around in case you need to log into your system to do some form of fix on your platform. I know the Linux Mint ISO now does have some boot repair tools on it. MX Linux comes with boot repair tools. Endeavor OS has good documentation. That's the good thing about Endeavor, is they had the documentation. Once I typed in to look up the problem on Endeavor OS, I was able to find and fix the problem from there. So that's the good news about it, but still, when you're doing updates, be warned, sometimes things do break. And this is why I'm not a huge fan of pushing updates. I do not need to be spending hours of my time every day fixing borked updates. And unfortunately, that happens when you're pushing updates, especially when you get crap like Plasma. Hey, look at our new feature. Thunderbird, hey, look at this awesome thing. We're going to put these stupid message threads by default and not have a way to turn it off globally. Are you idiots? Really? I mean, come on. Anyway, that'll end this angry, saucy video for today. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a look over at the support page on the website switchtolinux.com, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.
Hola gente, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estáis? Yo creo que estoy bien. Soy Mario, un informático extremeño. Este vídeo es un directado, un directo editado, un cachino de nada de esos directos que hago en la plataforma innombrable. Fíjate Twitch, venga que empieza. Pues vamos a probar una cosa. Ha llegado el momento de cambiar de infusión, que me he traído aquí un poleo menta que alimenta. Espérate, todavía tiene hasta la etiqueta esta puesta. Mira, ¿esto tiene algún uso? Yo lo voy a echar aquí. Poleo menta que alimenta. Aquí lo tengo, miaos de cabra. Un sorbito, una solución para Linux. 2 voy a traer hoy. Sí, porque vamos a iniciar Fedora, que vamos a arreglar lo del grupo. Espérate, que tengo para aquí los apuntes. Hombre, que me lo está apuntando, mira. Tengo aquí todo apuntado. Todas las cosas que tengo que hacer, todos los pasos. Claro, que luego se me olvida.
Esas cabezas no están bien.
La hora de las soluciones. Pipi. Hora Casio. Aquí está. Y ahora voy a encender la computadora. A ver, pi. Pi. Ahí está el pi. Lo que voy a arreglar es lo del nomode set, que me estaba dando problemas. Y también voy a arreglar una cosita de KDE. Ah, y por cierto, me he traído un ratón, porque es que no me manejo con el touchpad. Me traigo esto.
Me importa un bledo.
Aquí se está iniciando. Como tiene el nomode set activo, pues se me inicia con esta calidad un poco ñorder, ¿no? Ahora voy a poner yo aquí. Voy a poner aquí la clave. ¿Eres tú la clave? ¿Solo tú? Aunque no lo sabes. Maravilloso fondo de escritorio. Y teníamos un problema. Primera solución. Yo doy aquí, por ejemplo, un clic y digo ¡ay! Que se me queda aquí en pequeñino. ¡Ay! Que ya no es tan pequeñino. Mira, mira, que ya he conseguido. ¡Ya lo he conseguido!
¡Arriba! ¡Venga!
A ver, ¿cómo se hace para tener estos iconos de aquí abajo como en Windows normal? O sea, que no se quede aquí en cuadraditos recogido. Es muy fácil. Botón derecho. Configurar gestor de tarea. No, miento. ¡Uy, qué mal!
Hay que estar súper concentrado.
Botón derecho. Entrar en modo edición. Ahí está. Y te tienes que venir aquí. Aquí. Te pones encima y ves que se te pone esto, gestor de tarea. Mostrar alternativas. Ahí. Y tienes 3 alternativas. Una es gestor de tareas. Gestor de tareas con solo iconos, que es la que viene por defecto. Y lista de ventanas. Pues hay que seleccionar gestor de tareas. Esa. Yo le voy a dar a cancelar porque ya está marcado. Y ya lo tienes como en Windows Classic Core. Mira. Como un renglón. Como a mí me gusta. No
No dice nada.